Hello, everyone. It is me, Pui. I have got this giant microphone in my face. It's a new microphone today because I have a big announcement and I need my biggest, baddest microphone. I am here today with none other than Birdman once again. We got the RGT theory video, we got the RGT top 8, we got the Panda Burn theory video, and we have the Panda Burn top 4 second place. You heard me right. Birdman just topped with Panda Burn FLC 25, losing only to Shifty all day. He killed everyone. I am so impressed. I am so proud of him. I am so excited to have him on today. Hello, Birdman.
Hello, how are you?
I am quite well. I am thrilled to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm not doing too bad myself either. Yeah, it was definitely a big event overall for me. I don't think I've had that many consecutive wins, anything before. So that was pretty cool.
For sure. I was certainly rooting for first, but I will gladly take what we got. This is another fantastic top for Panda. Before we start, I want to ask you, what was the most exciting match of the event for you?
Um, I mean, there were a few sets. I would say my sets before I made top four had it felt like an uphill battle, and once I had made the top four, my opponents before grand finals definitely went down swinging, like respect to them and everything. But like I had some really difficult sets early on in the bracket where I sort of told myself like if you just get past this one, everything will be uphill from here, like comparatively. So like definitely fighting Ivan was exciting because I kind of watched him the first game and he just sort of watched me the second game. I mean, a lot of my turbo matches were going down like that, which is sort of how I had built chain energy burn for this event was like it doesn't have quite the same backbone that the decks that I build normally like to have, but it doesn't need it because it just burns that much faster. And it was pretty successful overall versus most of my turbo opponents. I mean, I at least got a set off of Shifty. I mean, we went 3-2 in games technically in our grand finals match. So it was like not horrible. I didn't do too good versus them in the winter semis match, but that was like the only loss I had in the whole event was Shifty twice. So it was definitely not too bad, my turbo matches at least, and that was like the majority of my matches. Like I fought maybe one Stein Monarch deck and like six turbo and like one CC and like one warrior.
That's an
Um,
absolutely wild run because I was running into just like warrior, warrior, and chaos control, and then like one.
Yeah, everyone else had interesting brackets, and I had honestly exactly what I wanted. I didn't want to fight a bunch of warriors. I'm glad I beat the one that I did fight in winners.
So let's take a look at the deck. I want to start by saying that a lot of the decisions you made here, we've already discussed plenty in our talk about Panda Burn. I will leave a link in the description below. If you haven't watched that already, you should go watch that because it is definitely the backbone of a lot of what's going on here. And so I'm mostly going to be covering some of the new stuff and trying to get to the bottom of what's changed. But you should definitely go check out that other video. We'll leave a link. Go watch that. Come back here. For starters, this is very much inspired by a combination of, I think, my build that I gave you and Maru's build, yeah?
Yes, those as well as Alvarado's build as well.
Indeed. How do you think you combined those three inspirations here?
Basically, the monster kit that I chose was specifically to have like pseudo floaters and beat sticks almost exclusively. Like I debated Exiled Force for a little bit, but I was like, it's just too good. I have to always play Exiled Force. Like it is what it is. But like the Spirit Reapers from Maru, the Gardna from Maru, even though they weren't playing Chain Energy, those cards are just like they almost feel like they were designed for Chain Energy. Spirit Reaper absolutely carried me throughout this event. It was like an insanely good card. It felt like every time I threw it out, no one was ready for it, even though like I'm obviously going to be playing it. It helped me in every match that I used it in, that I decided to side it into.
I want to point out that this is the second event where we've seen Spirit Reaper take a Panda Burn to second place. So if
Yep.
you didn't think there was something there before, Panda players, pay attention. Spirit Reaper actually kind of good though. Could be mainable, especially with the big shield eating the knock early. It's kind of
Yep.
hard to get rid of Spirit Reaper.
Yeah, Mystic Walk actually, speaking of the Gardna, Mystic Walk helped me out a few times versus Turbo, just make the game a little longer. Like what happened in my matches versus Warrior and versus a few of my Turbo opponents, at least in one game, they bled themselves a ton trying to get rid of chain energy, and by the time they got rid of chain energy, they would have had to Mystic Walk just to like stay in the game and staying able to play cards. So I know that they can't use it reflexively, which is really a huge part of why Mystic Walk is so scary. Is
Yeah.
that they can use it like in response to a Saku or a Mirror Force or a Magic Cylinder, etc., etc. Like if they're just using it just to continue playing with me having that card as well is actually like hilariously enough a pretty relevant thing. Like tributing my own Panda when it's jacked after it's about to get Saku'd and I'm going to lose the game. Like, for example, in my grand final set, I get Magic Cylindered on a 2800 Panda, and I essentially lose game three from swinging into that. I just had one of my Mystic Walks in my hand.
So I just
I'm
would like to get this straight for a
6,000.
second. We've hit such an excessive level of meme with the meme walk that now we have the Panda Burn players using meme walk to counter meme walk.
I really think Wombat Meme Walk is just kind of good sometimes. Like I wasn't used throwing in the Wombats because I wasn't seeing anyone do the Wombats, but it's a level 3. It plays under Gravity Bind.
You're
It's pretty.
breaking my brain right now.
This is
These
just
cards
how
are
I think.
just broken.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're just good cards. Like Mystic Walk, it just elongates the game, and if I'm playing Chain Energy Burn at this point and not Panda Burn, then it's like it is what it is. I want a longer game. Like I want to be able to keep playing Chain Energy. So
For
it
sure.
actually helps. Gardner doesn't do much after it eats those first couple of hits, right? But
Hmm.
under Chain Energy, that still is getting you like 1500, 2000 damage, so it's pretty nice. And then suddenly you plus off of it when they think that they're finally going to swing into your Gardner if you sub in the Mystic Walks. And a lot a lot of people weren't expecting that. I didn't often actually draw it because it's just a two of, or sometimes I'd only sub in one, so it'd be a one of. But I'm thinking maybe like Cyberstein in the main or the side paired with these walks, paired with this chain energy stuff, maybe even better. Just as like another random tech, like a bomb that you have floating in your deck to sort of finish things off with the chain energy. But not to give too much away, we have a lot of things that we can discuss privately and work on as a burn community after this one. This is a good representation, I think, of a lot of the theory craft that like the collective burn subconscious has been sort of pushing towards, and I had to give up a lot of what I actually like to do with this deck to put all of this in here in a way that I felt made the most sense and would be the most consistent. So like
Yeah, so you talked to me about this a lot before we got on camera. You mentioned that in order to play this deck to victory, you had to play in a way that wasn't intuitive to you. So, do you want to talk
yes.
more about that and the changes you made?
Yeah, I mean, normally, even when people were sort of getting turned on to the chain energy, I was one of the people that would either main two, side one, or I would side all three at a couple of events recently. And basically, my thinking in maining the three came down to having to make a few key changes to my monster and spell trap kit that I don't really like. I like having heavy and revival in my main deck if I can in Panda, just so that I can more easily pivot in game two and three to aggro. Like with this build, the pivot to aggro felt essentially impossible, so I didn't attempt it, which is again like pretty much all of my lists up until now have an aggro pivot, but it's just a mystery box of what that aggro pivot's gonna be, so you can't really be too prepared for it. But with this, I was more like, here comes a different burn deck game two, but it's still just a burn deck. So
Birdman, this
it
is
was
before your time, but I gotta tell you a funny anecdote. Did you know that this deck used to be considered a subset of Aggro Bomb?
yes.
Please, everyone just look at this and tell me it's Aggro Bomb. I dare you.
Yeah, it's definitely fallen off from that, but I do want to attempt something that is like very high roll and aggro soon, to be honest. I think that would be really fun. But the chain energy like really put in so much work. The majority of my sets versus turbo players were won off of chain energy, and even when I was playing warrior and monarch, chain energy came in super clutch because heavy storm like in a lot of situations loses a lot of relevance unless they can play it really early before eating a lot of damage, and they sort of plus off of that plus by taking advantage of the field overall, like eliminating all of my monsters because I lost my floodgates, and then just sort of maintaining control, which would happen every now and then. It basically only happened for Shifty, and in a couple of game twos, like it happened game two versus Ivan. It happened game one versus Alethea, where like I didn't knock a set monster because I was like, is this Monarchs that I'm fighting? Probably, but I then got Monarched. Because once it gets rolling, it's a lot harder to deal with if you're down tempo with chain energy burn. Like you have to open well, but I sort of managed to open well 60-70% of the time. So
I have a couple of questions about some specific cards here. Definitely trying to figure out what makes this deck different. First thing I want to point out, which is something that I suggested, and I guess made it into the final cut, was 2 Just Desserts. What do you think about 2 Just Desserts?
2 Just Desserts was actually like all I needed, because Just Desserts is the kind of card where I'm either dropping it right away and just using it as a chainable, like a Jar of Greed or something, or I'm holding it indefinitely until I push for game with it. And so you don't really want to draw it in a lot of circumstances. Whereas, like, I sort of weighed it out in my mind between Chain Energy and Just Desserts, which would be better at 2, which would be better at 3. And I decided that even though Chain Energy would seem like the obvious pick to go at 2, that it's actually significantly better at 3 if I have a monster kit that's tailored to the card.
For sure, for sure. Moving on, we have brought the Gravity Binds back, and Swords of Revealing Light is gone.
Yes. So Swords may have come in handy versus Shifty's Flip Turbo, to be honest. But overall, what I found is that because it only lasts 3 turns, it adds no inevitability to Chain Energy. Like, they just can not do anything for 3 turns. And, like, yeah, that's a little scary for them, but, like, it's also scary for me, and I'm not really getting what I want out of Chain Energy in that circumstance. Whereas, Gravity Bind, it's not ideal to have your Gravity Bind and your Chain Energy out together, but, in the situation where you do, let's say that Heavy Storm is gone or something, they're suddenly, like, really up against it because there is inevitability. It's like, okay, you have to out Gravity Bind and Chain Energy, like, to keep playing the game, and you have to make a decision which one you're going to out first. Because if you out the Gravity Bind, you could just continue to push with your monsters suddenly, if you feel like you could do that. But if you don't, then you have to out the Chain Energy so that you can just actually play the game.
You got 1 Nobleman of Crossout in the main now, which seems to have replaced the 3rd Nightmare Wheel, I suppose.
I haven't really been on 3-wheel in a while, although I do like the idea of 3-wheel. I've just only had space for 2-wheel, and I refused to cut those 2 wheels. So my thinking was, I have 3 soft knocks in my deck, really 4 if you count Exiled, and I just wanted 1 more anti-turbo in my main. I wanted a hard knock, exactly. And so I was also anticipating Monarchs because siding into a certain Monarch has become a very popular thing, and Nightmare Wheel does not really help me significantly against that. I can't wheel on the Monarch summon, and I can't wheel before the Monarch summon, but I can knock. So it did come in handy in certain situations. Same with Ceasefire, how they all play slightly differently from one another. I needed a full rotation of ways to punish them for setting. And then the Exiled Force is like an emergency.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that certain Monarch, I see he's only at 1 now, and in a side that's significantly different than all the decks that we really covered before, certainly the one I suggested, the last one I saw from you, what role is Mobius playing here versus those other decks with the beatdown side?
So yeah, I was pretty sad to take out all of my aggro guys from my side, but I refused to not have at least 1 Cypher and 1 Mobius in there, so they're more or less in there just as like a representation of the way that I like to play the game, but also Mobius specifically, so Mobius, Wombat, and the Walks were primarily to fight another burn deck, like if it just came up. And when I was actually building this, I was thinking the Reaper too, like more than or equally than my Turbo matchups, but Reaper really came up versus Turbo a lot. Mobius was there for burn, but I ended up using him versus Warrior, and it came up huge, like absolutely huge. My thinking was also that I need at least 1 Tribute Summon in my 55 cards if I'm going to be main decking Snatch Steal, so that it can become more powerful game 2.
Moving on, and we see a scapegoat here as well as a threatening roar. What were these for?
Yeah, so in my version of this deck, you actually very frequently, and this theory held true versus the turbo players I fought, I would stay on chain energy all 3 games. Because even if I get it in a game where I'm not going first, if it's paired with several 3-ofs in this deck, or some of the 1-ofs in my side deck, I'm at like a tremendous advantage. The fact that T-Roar and Goat are sort of chainables that I can just have sitting there looming next to the chain energy, let's say with a set Big Shield Gardna or something, it's enough to where each card is its own individual pain in the ass to out. Like, if you were to heavy my chain energy and my scapegoat, I don't really care. And the logic was the same with the T-Roar. A big part of my theory in my matches was that while chain energy is like the crux of this deck, the idea is that it's going to get outed at some point because of the inevitability the card like creates in the matchup. My like personal theory was that this card was so good because it made my other floodgates suddenly relevant again. And so the only matchup where this concept was challenged at all was with the Mask of Darkness. Funnily enough,
Thought
like
it
with
was
the
gonna
flip,
be Mask of Darkness that did it.
because it could recur the dust tornadoes, it could recur the
Yeah.
wing blasts, and it really came in handy. It the extended removal and the recurring removal forced me to play once again more aggro in grand finals versus the rest of my sets. I was swinging with a lot of cards that are sort of irrelevant to swing with just to prevent any loop from happening, which I think I did a pretty good job of in the first set. In the second set, it started to happen a little bit more, but until game 3, where I just went for a big burn and it wasn't enough, and I just had no resources, until that like final like 5th game, there was no real like recurring looping. It would just be like a one-time thing, like a one of just to get rid of like a set monster or something. So even then, Chain Energy was sort of holding it down versus that strategy. It's a very solid card overall. I think very underestimated still.
Okay. Anything else you want to add before we wrap this up? I think you've really covered a lot of what I was wondering about and really showed off that this deck is changing and doing a lot of new stuff. But any final thoughts?
Well, yeah, this is basically like what I was saying the last time, how you could play 2 fundamentally different pandas. This is only one half of why Panda Burn is really good, honestly. Like, there's a whole other style you can tap into that I am going to attempt to have some sort of topping with at the next event. Because this is definitely just like one proposed theory of how Panda Burn could be good. It's like a chain energy oriented deck that still sort of speed burns them out of the game.
Yeah, I go to say I made that aggro bomb joke before, but I think we are getting kind of close to possibly there being 2 actual variants of Panda Burn.
Exactly. And one is aggro bomb.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah, exactly. We'll have
Exactly.
aggro Panda Burn
That's
and
what I'm
shiny
saying.
Panda Burn.
No, I agree with you. That's yep. I'm going to try to show that off because after seeing some of these other lists, this list, as you can see, like was completely inspired by others. Like, this is not really the way that I typically would play the deck. And my next list will also basically only be inspired by others, but in a much more aggressive way.
Mm-hmm. So, in summation, Panda Burn topping again, another second place, another top tier finish. Meme Walk is now being cited by Panda against Turbo, and Aggro Bomb is now a variant of Panda Burn rather than the inverse. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe in this wacky world we now live in, and I hope you all have a lovely day.